If you're captivated by tales of resilience, forbidden romance, and second chances against all odds, subscribe now to receive more stories that will keep you turning pages late into the night. Spring of 1887 pressed down on Copper Falls like a boot heel on dry earth. Wind came hard off the eastern plains, carrying grit that settled into every crease of leather, every fold of fabric. The boardwalks creaked under boot heels and kerosene lamps flickered behind storefront windows as afternoon dimmed toward evening. In a cramped room above Henderson's General Store, the Copper Falls Business Institute held its evening classes. Caroline Hartwell, 23 years old, with ink-stained fingers and determination carved into every angle of her face, occupied the corner desk farthest from the stove. Her project ledger lay open before her, columns marching down the page in her precise script. She needed this certificate the way a drowning person needs air. Beyond the institute windows, the Morrison cattle operation dominated the western edge of town. Freight wagons rumbled through the main gate at all hours. Above it all, in an office perched over the equipment yard, Daniel Morrison kept the books himself. The widower, the man who buried his wife 2 winters back and emerged harder than the ground that took her. Caroline gathered her papers that Thursday afternoon, tucking them inside a leather portfolio her father had carried before sickness bent him double. If she hurried, she might catch Morrison before he left for the day. The ranch office stairs creaked under her worn boots. She knocked twice, then pushed the door open. Daniel Morrison sat behind a desk that had seen better decades left, his coat hanging on a peg, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was 38, tall and raw-boned, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes the color of winter ice. "Office hours ended at 4, he said flatly. "I know, Mr. Morrison. I apologize for the intrusion." Caroline stepped forward. "I'm Caroline Hartwell from the Business Institute. Professor Green suggested your operation might benefit from documentation for territorial assessment." "My books balance, Miss Hartwell, have since the day I took over this operation." "I'm certain they do, sir. But the territorial assessor requires verified documentation for operations above 5,000 head. Your records would provide excellent experience for my certification project." He snapped his ledger shut. A sound cracked through the office like a gunshot. "Fancy notions don't balance books, Miss Hartwell. Numbers either add up or they don't." He stood. "I suggest you find simpler work. Good afternoon." She descended those creaking stairs with rage and humiliation roaring in her chest, her portfolio pressed against her ribs like armor. The one-room shack behind the livery stable smelled of carbolic and boiled linen. Her father, Jacob Hartwell, lay on the narrow cot near the stove, his breathing shallow and wet. He'd been a freight clerk before the cough settled into his lungs and refused to leave. "How did it go, sweetheart?" He managed. "Still working on it, Papa. Don't worry." But she did worry. The tin box under the loose floorboard held $8.37. Dr. Ashford had been clear. There was a surgeon in Denver who specialized in lung ailments. The procedure cost $50, plus travel, plus lodging. Call it $75 total. $8.37. Caroline visited 4 establishments before noon the next day. The saddle maker, the feed store, the boarding house, the land office. Each one already had adequate record-keeping. By Saturday, desperation tasted like copper on her tongue. The Golden Rose Saloon was hiring serving girls. 50 cents a night, plus tips if you smiled right and didn't mind hands that wandered. Caroline's stomach turned at the thought, but arithmetic didn't lie. The following Saturday, she walked past the Golden Rose 3 times before she finally pushed through the doors. The smell hit her first. Tobacco, whiskey, sweat. Piano music jangled from the corner. A heavy woman with rouge thick as paint materialized at her elbow. "You lost, honey? I heard you might need help serving drinks. $1 a night, keep your own tips. Be here at 6 o'clock next Friday." Friday arrived like a firing squad. For the first hour, it wasn't terrible. Caroline carried drinks, collected empty glasses, pocketed 3 nickels in tips. Then a man at the corner table grabbed her wrist as she passed. "Sit down, sweetheart. Have a drink with us." "I'm working, sir. Perhaps another time." His grip tightened. Another hand landed on her waist from behind. Laughter erupted around the table. "Please let go," Caroline said, voice thin. Then a shadow fell across the table, and every man at it went silent. Daniel Morrison stood in the doorway, hat pulled low, coat dusty from riding. His gaze swept the room, landed on Caroline, and froze. "Take your hands off her. Now." The man released Caroline's wrist like it had burned him. Morrison shifted his attention to her. "Outside, Miss Hartwell." She followed him onto the boardwalk, legs shaking. He stopped beside a hitching post, jaw tight. "What in God's name are you doing in there?" "Working. I needed money, and they hired me, and it's none of your concern." "It became my concern the moment you walked into that place." He pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. "You don't belong there." "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice. Not when your father's dying and you've got $8 to your name and 3 weeks before the only surgeon who can help him leaves Denver." The words tore out of her, loud and ragged. "So unless you're offering alternatives, Mr. Morrison, I suggest you mind your own business." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "How much do you need?" $75. His jaw worked. "Let's make a deal." He pulled out a small notebook and began writing. "I'll stake the operation and 3 months' rent. Cash up front tonight. In return, you sign a promissory note agreeing to finish my books properly for the territorial assessor's review. Pass your institute examination with those figures and the debt's forgiven. Fail, and you repay every dollar within a year." Caroline's heart slammed against her ribs. "Why would you do that?" "Because I need those books done, and you need money, and this solves both problems." He handed her the page. "Read it. If you agree, we'll visit the bank in the morning." She read the terms twice, hands trembling. It was harsh, but it was also salvation. "I agree." "Good. Then get your things and go home. You don't need to be in there anymore." Subscribe now to never miss a story like Caroline's, where determination meets destiny and love blooms in the most unexpected places. Saturday morning, they met at the bank. The manager witnessed the promissory note and counted out the money. By Monday, Dr. Ashford had sent a telegram to Denver confirming Jacob's appointment. Tuesday evening, Morrison sent word. "Be at the ranch office Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock sharp." The work devoured her. Freight manifests, supply orders, payroll ledgers, fencing contracts. Caroline arrived at 6 each morning and stayed until the light failed. Morrison drilled her like a cavalry sergeant. "Stand up. Recite those columns. Explain that variance. Where's the supporting documentation?" She wanted to hate him. Some mornings she did. But she learned more in those 2 weeks than she'd learned in 6 months at the Institute. The surgery happened on a Saturday morning at the Morrison Ranch house. They cleared the kitchen table, covered it with fresh muslin boiled in the same pot that had sterilized the surgical instruments. Caroline held a lamp near the makeshift operating table, while Dr. Ashford worked with swift, sure hands. The surgeon from Denver assisted with quiet competence. Dawn came gray and soft through the kitchen windows. Dr. Whitaker stepped back, stripping off his gloves. "That's it. Clean work. If infection doesn't set in, he'll recover." Caroline's knees buckled. A neighbor woman caught her elbow. "Steady now. The worst is past." Jacob woke an hour later, groggy and pale, but alive. Morrison appeared in the doorway as Caroline scrubbed blood from the floor. "Your father's a fighter." "He is." She sat back on her heels, exhaustion dragging at her. "Thank you for all of this. You'll earn it. Monday morning, 6 o'clock, my office. Bring a sharp pencil and your stubbornness." The work continued through March into April. Supply orders reconciled, payroll matched, freight receipts verified. Caroline's fingers cramped from writing, but the columns balanced clean and true. Morrison remained professional, distant, and demanding, but small things changed. He remembered how she took her coffee. Once when she sneezed and sprayed ink across a fresh sheet, he simply handed her a rag and started ruling a new page without comment. Then came the spring dance. Caroline attended reluctantly, wearing her best dress. Daniel Morrison appeared at her elbow. "Dance, Miss Hartwell." "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I. We'll muddle through together." He led her onto the floor as the fiddler struck up a waltz. His hands settled at her waist, proper and firm. He wasn't much of a dancer. He counted beats under his breath and stepped on her foot twice. But his hand at her waist was warm, and when their eyes met, he didn't look away. "You're doing well with the books," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." "High praise from you, Mr. Morrison." "Daniel, What? When we're not working, it's Daniel. The music swelled. They turned through the other couples, and Caroline felt something shift inside her chest. The dance ended. He walked her back to the punch bowl, nodded, and disappeared into the crowd. An hour later, the hall had emptied to half capacity. Caroline stood near the coat hooks, fumbling with her shawl pin. "Let me." Daniel appeared beside her, took the pin from her shaking fingers, and fixed her shawl properly. When he finished, he didn't step away. She looked up. He looked down. Lamplight glowed soft and golden. "Your collar's crooked," she said, voice barely above a whisper. She reached up, straightened the collar, then adjusted a vest button. Her fingertips rested against the fabric too long. His breath caught. Her pulse jumped. Daniel stepped back. "I should take you home." They walked through town in silence. At the door to her shack, he tipped his hat, said goodnight, and walked away. The next morning, she arrived at the office at 6 sharp, determined to be professional. Daniel was already there, and he looked at her like nothing had happened. So she followed his lead, opened her notebook, focused on the numbers. But something had changed. When he handed her a document, their fingers brushed. When he leaned over her shoulder to check a calculation, she felt the heat of him. 2 days later, she teased him about a calculation error. He denied it, grinning. She insisted, laughing. He reached for her notebook. She danced away, holding it above her head. "Give it back, Miss Hartwell. Admit you made a mistake, Mr. Morrison." She ran around the desk, still laughing. He followed, reaching for the notebook. She dodged again. "Caroline." She stopped. He'd never used her first name before. He stopped too, suddenly aware of what he'd said. They stood there, breathing hard, something wild crackling in the space they'd been so careful to maintain. Then Daniel Morrison cracked completely. "I want more." His voice came out raw, desperate. He moved around the desk. "I want more." He closed the distance between them. She backed toward the wall. He stopped inches away, hands braced on either side of her shoulders. "More than silence," he said quietly. "More than professional boundaries and careful distance and pretending I don't notice how you bite your lip when you're concentrating. More than watching you leave every evening and telling myself it's better this way." "Daniel, I want more," he said again and kissed her. His mouth crashed against hers, desperate and clumsy and perfect. She rose up on her toes, hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the wanting she'd been swallowing for weeks. They broke apart, gasping, his forehead pressed against hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered. "Then why does it feel right?" "Because it is right, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." He kissed her again, slower this time. Her fingers threaded through his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally separated, they stood there looking at each other like people who'd just survived a storm. "This complicates things," Caroline said. "Everything about you complicates things." She smiled, and he smiled back. Spring burned into early summer. The books neared completion, 6 months of transactions verified and documented in Caroline's precise script. But other things grew too. Stolen kisses when no one else was in the office, his hand covering hers when they reviewed figures. The way he said her name when he thought she wasn't listening. They kept it private. The town was small, and gossip spread faster than prairie fire. Then the whispers started. Someone mentioned how convenient it was that Daniel Morrison's sick wife should die just as cattle prices climbed. Perhaps he'd wanted her gone. The whispers spread. By Sunday services, they'd grown teeth. Caroline heard it secondhand from Clara Pendleton. "It's a lie," she said. "A vicious, hateful lie." By Monday, the bank manager sent a formal request for an accounting review. Until a neutral party could examine the Morrison operations books, Daniel Morrison should step back from his own accounts. The letter arrived Tuesday morning. Caroline watched Daniel read it, watched his face go still and empty. "They think I killed her." "They think wrong," Caroline said fiercely. "I'll comply with their request. You'll finish the books alone. When the assessor arrives, you'll present them on my behalf." "Daniel, no. That's how it has to be." He turned, and his expression was winter ice. "Professional boundaries, Miss Hartwell. Let's maintain them." He left the office, and she didn't see him again for 3 days. Caroline finished the last entry alone. Every transaction from September through May verified and cross-referenced. She carried the ledgers to the ranch house at dusk, finding Daniel on the porch. "They're done," she said simply. "You should present them without me. My name attached will only muddy things. Your name belongs on them. You built this operation." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice worn smooth by grief, he told her about Eleanor, the schoolteacher's daughter, the pregnancy that came late and went wrong, the 8 months of watching her fade. "Cain and his kind think I hastened things along for profit. Truth is, I'd have given every head of cattle I owned to save her. But money can't buy miracles. Sometimes you just lose." Caroline reached over and covered his hand with hers. "I know." They sat in silence while the storm built, until finally he turned his hand palm up and threaded his fingers through hers. The next morning, Caroline walked into the bank with the completed ledgers under one arm and her chin set like flint. "The Morrison operations books are complete and ready for review." She set the ledgers on the desk with a solid thump. "If you want an independent accounting, you've got one from me." The review took 4 hours. By noon, both men looked exhausted. "Well," Caroline kept her voice steady, the territorial deputy closed the last ledger. "Miss Hartwell, these are the cleanest books I've reviewed in 5 years. Every transaction is documented, every variance explained. The Morrison operation is not only legitimate, it's exemplary." She walked out of that bank and went straight to the ranch office. Daniel was pacing like a caged wolf. "It's done," she said. "You're cleared." He stopped mid-stride, stared at her, then crossed the room in 3 long steps and pulled her into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. The letter from the territorial office arrived within the week, clearing Daniel Morrison's name completely. The bank posted it publicly. Daniel came to the shack behind the livery stable on a Thursday evening, hat in both hands. "Jacob Hartwell," answered. "Stronger now." "Mr. Hartwell, I'd like permission to court your daughter properly, with intentions toward marriage if she'll have me." Jacob studied him, then nodded. "She makes her own choices, but if you hurt her, you'll answer to me." "Understood, sir." Caroline appeared in the doorway. Daniel looked at her, and the expression on his face was worth every difficult moment. "Miss Hartwell, Caroline, would you do me the honor of allowing me to court you?" "Yes," she said, not bothering to hide her smile. "Yes, I would." They started carefully, properly. Sunday services together, walks through town, dinners at the boarding house. But alone in the office, they let the careful distance collapse. He kissed her against the filing cabinet while papers scattered to the floor. By July, Daniel proposed. No grand gestures, just the two of them on the ranch house porch as a storm rolled in. "Marry me," he said. "I know we haven't been courting long, and I know there's still talk, but marry me, Caroline, please." She kissed him instead of answering, and that was answer enough. The wedding happened in August, simple and quick. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony in the community hall. When he pronounced them married, Daniel kissed his bride with enough feeling that someone whispered from the front row. Their first night as husband and wife unfolded quietly in the ranch house. Daniel stood awkwardly by the window. "I don't want to rush you," he said. She crossed to him, laid a hand against his chest. "I don't want to wait." He undid the pins in her hair, watching it tumble down. She unbuttoned his vest, then worked on his shirt while he kissed her neck, her jaw, her mouth. When they finally came together in that brass bed with moonlight spilling through the window, it felt right, like coming home. Afterward they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I love you too." Their first child arrived the following spring, a daughter with Daniel's dark hair and Caroline's stubborn chin. They named her Margaret Rose, called her Maggie. Jacob Hartwell, fully recovered, moved into a small cottage on the ranch property and appointed himself official grandfather. The Morrison operation prospered. With Caroline managing the books and Daniel running operations, they expanded carefully. By the time their second child arrived, a son they named Thomas Jacob, the ranch employed 15 hands year-round. Caroline became the territory's most sought-after accountant. Ranchers, merchants, even the bank itself came to her for reconciliation. She took over teaching advanced bookkeeping at the Business Institute 2 evenings a week. Their life settled into rhythm. Work and children, seasons turning, the ranch growing strong. But passion didn't fade with familiarity. He'd catch her in the pantry, pull her against him, and kiss her until jars rattled on shelves. One summer evening, after the children were asleep, they lay in bed while rain drummed on the roof. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked. "Marrying me, taking on ranch life." She rolled over to face him. "Not once. Do you? Every day I wake up beside you, I wonder what I did to deserve this. Then I stop wondering and just count myself grateful. You saved me, Caroline, from becoming the bitter man everyone thought I already was. You saved me first." They weren't keeping balanced ledgers anymore. Love didn't work that way. But it was enough to say it, to lie there in the darkness, and be grateful. On their 10th anniversary, Daniel surprised her by commissioning a proper office in town. Oak paneling, fireproof storage, a desk large enough for two. The brass nameplate read Hartwell and Morrison Accounting Services. "You've earned it," he said. "And I like working beside you, always have." So they divided their time. Mornings at the ranch, afternoons in town, evenings with their children. The book stayed balanced, the ranch prospered, and on summer nights when storms built on the horizon, they'd stand on the back porch watching lightning split the sky, fingers threaded together. "Still glad you signed that promissory note?" Daniel asked one such evening. Caroline leaned back against his chest and smiled. "Best debt I ever incurred. And the best investment I ever made." Thunder rumbled across the plains. Inside, children's laughter mixed with the sound of a grandfather clock ticking steady and sure. The future lay open like a fresh ledger, blank pages waiting to be filled with careful figures, honest dealing, and love that balanced perfectly despite never quite adding up the way numbers should. They stood together and promised silently to keep writing that story for as long as breath and ink lasted. If Caroline and Daniel's journey moved you, subscribe today for more unforgettable stories of love, courage, and triumph. Join thousands of readers who refuse to settle for ordinary tales.